Greetings, Algo artisans. In so many words, Putin says the dollar is dying. Is that true? Why? What does it even mean? Is Bitcoin the answer? We're going to talk about that right now. But before we get into it, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, follow me on X, follow me on YouTube. It helps me get more content out to you. So the main part of the Tucker and Putin interview that we're going to look at today has to do with the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. And to understand that, we have to understand an agreement that happened at a place called Bretton Woods. And this is basically where a lot of countries around the world, with the exception of the Soviets, got together and made an agreement that the US dollar would be pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. And what this did was make it such that the United States could not print dollars unless it actually was backed by gold in existence. And gold has a finite supply. So this was a prevention of letting the US print money that was unbacked. It kept things stable. The world's reserve currency, back to this article. The US dollar was officially crowned the world's reserve currency and backed by the world's largest gold reserves thanks to the Bretton Woods Agreement. Instead of gold reserves, the other countries accumulated reserves of US dollars. Needing a place to store their dollars, countries began buying US Treasury securities, which they considered to be safe store of money. The demand for Treasury securities and the deficit spending to finance the Vietnam War and the Great Society domestic programs caused the US states to flood the market with paper money. It says, with growing concerns over stability, the countries converted their dollar reserves into gold. The demand for gold was such that President Nixon was forced to intervene and delink the dollar from gold, which led to floating exchange rates. So behind this paragraph is a bit of a story. Vietnam and Great Society, right? Great Society, I think Lyndon Baines Johnson put that into play. It was a social program. Essentially, it's socialism. It's giving money to people for stuff, right? Okay. Is that good? Is it bad? We're not even talking about that. It's not a political opinion. It just is what it was. And there's not really necessarily a financial reward for that, right? I mean, there's arguments, but we're not going to go there. Now, the Vietnam War, that was pricey, right? First of all, it was an undeclared war. Secondly, the French left before we got there. And the Vietnam War, that it didn't end well for us, and it was very, very pricey. And the amount of deficit spending, meaning that the amount of money we had to spend that we did not get from tax receipts, the amount of money we had to borrow to pay for Vietnam was massive. And Germany and France in particular, got really concerned. France, knowing what Vietnam costs, because they had been there, they actually became really concerned and they floated a few ships over, I think to, I want to say it was in New York, and they said, we want our gold. And Nixon went ahead and saw that the rest of the world was seeing what was going on, and they were suspicious that we were printing more money than was backed by gold, breaking the rule that I talked about before. And so Nixon, quote unquote, temporarily took us off the gold standard, quote unquote. He interrupted some television show, I think it was on a Sunday night, and he basically said, we are going to delink the dollar from gold. That led to floating exchange rates. There was a lot of inflation. There was oil problems. Not to veer too far from history here, but we will talk about a little bit of how that was fixed and what the petrodollar came out of this, or how it came out of this. Henry Kissinger went over to Saudi Arabia, basically. And I think it was around 74 that the deal was pretty much made where we told Saudi Arabia, like, okay, we feel that, first of all, Saudi was the largest oil producer, right, at the time outside of the United States. And we let them know we would provide you military protection and we would give you financial preference, if you will. And you will sell your oil to us and make sure you sell it in dollars. And you will make sure all the rest of the countries in the Middle East who you more or less control will sell in dollars. And what this did was it created artificial demand for the dollar that was no longer linked to gold. Because now, in order to buy oil, which is what everybody buys all the time, is the primary economic input to everything. In order to buy oil, you had to use dollars now. And so this is how the dollar was kind of saved. When it was taken off of gold and no longer qualifying as the reserve currency due to the delinked gold, the petrodollar was created. Okay, so the petrodollar is relative to this conversation with Putin, but not that important. So we'll go ahead and we'll watch this video with regard to the first question with regard to what's going to happen with the dollar and its place in the world.
Well, let's just give one example, the US dollar. Is that going away as the reserve currency, the universally accepted currency? How have sanctions, do you think, changed the dollar's place in the world?
To use the dollar as a tool of foreign policy struggle is one of the biggest strategic mistakes made by the US political leadership. Look at what is going on in the world. Even the United States allies are now downsizing their dollar reserve. Seeing this, everyone starts looking for ways to protect themselves. But the fact that the United States applies restrictive measures to certain countries, such as placing restrictions on transactions, freezing assets, etc., causes grave concern and sends a signal to the whole world. Until 2022, about 80% of Russian foreign trade transactions were made in US dollars and euros, while currently it is down to 13%. It wasn't us who banned the use of the US dollar, it was decision of the United States to restrict our transactions in US dollars. It damages the US economy, undermines the power of the United States across the world. Our transactions in yuan accounted for about 3%. Today, 34% of our transactions are made in rubles and about as much, a little over 34% in yuan. Why did the United States do this? They probably thought it would lead to full collapse, but nothing collapsed. Moreover, other countries, including oil producers, are thinking of and already accepting payments for oil in yuan. You are cutting yourself off. All experts say this. Ask any intelligent and thinking person in the United States what the dollar means for the US. You're killing it with your own hands.
So you can see here that Putin is basically saying that we've cut ourselves off. The dollar was supposed to be something that everybody could use equally. And yes, of course, you're having an issue when the petrodollar came into play, but everybody still used it and used it widely, not just for oil, but for purchasing of all commodities around the world, pretty much. It's like, well, the dollar was kind of it. And the dollar is a massive economy. It's very fungible. It's very easy to work with for the most part, right? But what ended up happening, actually, that is causing everybody to go away from the dollar, he's talking about it here. He alludes to it. So we're going to move over to a new article here. It does address exactly what happened. It's Russia preparing legal action to unfreeze $6 billion in foreign currency reserves. And this is an article in The Guardian. So the sanctions themselves did a couple of things. It caused Russia to be very limited in how it can transact internationally in oil, although Russia very quickly found ways around that, but it did make Russia only able to sell oil at a certain price. Of course, the market found a way around that extremely quickly, and Russia's economy banged along, no problem. But they did seize and freeze $500 billion of foreign currency reserves, which Russia was probably planning to use in their special military operation. So, and that's one thing that really kind of drew the ire of much of the community. Now, this is not the first time this has happened. It actually happened to Iran, right? And when the FX reserves, which is just like money that they have in savings, like, just reserves of money that they can use for whatever they need, right? Well, when Iran's FX reserves were frozen, everybody kind of looked in the world and said, oh my gosh, the dollar was supposed to be something that everybody could use. We were supposed to be able to trust the dollar such that something like this would never even happen, and political lines were not supposed to be an issue in this. But over the years, it has more and more become so, where the dollar used to be freely used by everybody, and now you have the US and the EU confiscating $500 billion of Russian reserves. When it happened to Iran, everybody got concerned. When it happened to Russia, that was it. So you'll notice here that Putin talks about how the amount of dollars-backed Russian transactions have decreased, and now they're using the yuan.
The question is what comes next, and maybe you trade one colonial power for another, much less sentimental and forgiving colonial power. I mean, are the BRICS, for example, in danger of being completely dominated by the Chinese economy in a way that's not good for their sovereignty?
Well, we have heard those boogeyman stories before. We're always told the same boogeyman story. Cooperation with China keeps increasing. The pace at which China's cooperation with Europe is growing is higher and greater than that of the growth of Chinese-Russian cooperation.
One thing to watch here is really how well did the sanctions work? We'll briefly look at the chart here just to kind of prove a point. The sanctions started right here at the beginning of 2022, and you can see it on the chart here. Okay, so as the dollar went up and the ruble went down, you saw a big spike, but in about a 6-week span, the dollar spiked, the ruble dumped because the dollar was going up, so that's what it's going to look like when the ruble dumps, right? And then the ruble came back and the dollar came back down and then sunk. And so the Russian economy actually became very strong. Now, after that, starting right about this time, you'll start to see that the Federal Reserve started to hike their rates, and of course the dollar started to catch up, and now things are finding an equilibrium, and that equilibrium seems to be kind of on the path that everything was on before, more or less, right? So the real question is, did the sanctions work? And given that we're pretty much looking at circling around a mean, it does not look like they really did a whole lot. And in fact, the sanctions actually pushed Russia out of the financial arms of the US, right? Now no longer using the dollar very much, as this speech or this interview explains, and now they're using a lot more rubles and a lot more yuan. They're creating the digital ruble, and there's going to be a lot less need for the dollar in the future. And the rest of the world is seeing this and doing the same. Even Europe is cooperating with China. And as you can see, this conversation, Tucker says, well, aren't you scared of working with China? They're a colonial power, right? And, he tries to make it sound like China is not as nice as the US, and colonially recently. I don't remember China invading Syria, Iraq, Libya, Yugoslavia, bombing Yugoslavia. I don't remember China doing any of those things in recent history. So I'm not sure why we would think China is a lot less nice than the U.S. based on recent history. I'm not sure where that's coming from. I think that might just be something Tucker is saying because who knows why. Maybe he's working for somebody. Russia's like, that's just a boogeyman story. We're not worried about that. And apparently Europe is not worried about that. Europe is trying to work with China as much as possible. If China was really such a boogeyman, then why is Europe trying to work with China at even a more a faster rate than Russia is, right? So, Putin, I'm not saying he's a good guy, bad guy, just he's a guy doing probably what's best for Russia, what's probably best for himself. That's just what people do. So we're not really doing a moral judgment on Putin today, but I will tell you, the guy pretty much wiped the floor. This wasn't really an adversarial interview, but Putin is just really good. I mean, he's a smart dude, knows how to talk, knows how to have a conversation, knows how to handle difficult questions. I think that Bitcoin is a really good answer for this because here's the thing about it. Even if you go to the yuan, right? Let's just say China becomes like very imperial, wants to do bad things, right? Or Russia does, or, I'm not saying that they're perfect countries with perfect people. It could just be that right now they're maybe playing nice and in the future they become imperial. We don't know what future is. What if their current leadership is good, but then the next round of people take over and it's not so good? We have no idea what the future is. So are we going to continue to trust fiat currencies that are controlled by countries? Is that how it's going to work? I don't think so. And I think that, say, a new type of currency is going to work out really well. One that nobody can stop from being transacted, one that is immutable, and one that has a finite supply. And I think Bitcoin or something like it is a really good answer for that, right? Because nobody's going to freeze your Bitcoin. You can't do it. If you have the wallet, nobody can take it from you, right? Not yet. There's no case of that happening, and there are nearly $1 trillion worth of reasons to try to be able to crack Bitcoin right now. If somebody could crack Bitcoin, they could get pretty rich, right? And they haven't done it, not thus far. So this is why I think Bitcoin or something like it is going to be a great solution, or maybe Bitcoin is part of the solution. And guess what? If you watch my video yesterday, which I will link to in this video, you will see that they are mining a lot of Bitcoin in Russia. And the question in yesterday's video was, is Putin like pro-Bitcoin or not? Well, it seems like he might be pro-Bitcoin to a certain degree. So watch that video. Like I said, I've just linked up to it. You'll see in the top corner of the screen right now. In the meantime, if you want to learn how to extract money out of the market on a regular basis, if you want to know how to protect yourself from what's coming as possibly the dollar is dying, dollar dying, this might be a hyperbolic. He never actually said the words, Putin never said the words the dollar is dying. Maybe he has, but not in this interview, right? He's just basically saying that people are moving away from the dollar. So if that's happening and you are doing business denominated in dollars, you might end up with some issues. So if you're going to need to gather assets, whether it be dollars or gold or crypto or whatever, houses, I don't care what it is, being able to extract money from the markets on a regular basis is a great way to do that. And what we do at Algo Factory is we put that power in your hands. You will create your own method for doing this. It is not complex. It is actually pretty simple. It does take work. It's not overnight rich, but all you have to do is get in, do the job. We will help you. There's a very high probability you will be successful in doing this. All right. So please come over to algofactory.tech. Check us out, trade your job, upgrade your life. See you on the next one. All right, hope you enjoyed the show. Please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. On the screen there you can see our website, algofactory.tech. Tap that QR code to take you straight there. I'm also very active on X. That's algo_factory777. We got TikTok and Rumble. In the meantime, we hope to see you over at the website. Come on over, trade your job, upgrade your life. We'll see you there.